Thank you for joining Quick Tips for Nonprofits. Today's quick tip is about tax exemption, and this is part two, in which we focus on the IRS sections covering federal income tax exemption. Community Law Center is a legal services provider for nonprofit organizations and community organizations throughout Maryland. Community Law Center is here as a resource and legal partner for nonprofits. We can help with a variety of legal issues such as formation, necessary filings, and governance for boards, to many other issues involving property, zoning, contracts, employment, nuisance issues, liquor board matters, and intellectual property. Today's quick tip is just for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice, which really should be tailored to your organization. If you wish to become a client of Community Law Center, your organization can submit a simple application. In part one, which was the previous video, we discussed the various federal and state taxes that apply to organizations in various situations, and we covered the exemption applications for these taxes. Today, we will focus on federal income tax exemption, which is commonly the largest component. Most people think of 501c3 public charities when they think of nonprofit tax exemption. Tax exemption under 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code is open to charitable, religious, and educational organizations that have purposes such as helping the underprivileged, advancing religion, education, or science, reducing government burdens and neighborhood tensions, defending human and civil rights, or maintaining buildings and monuments. These organizations are allowed exemption not only from paying federal income tax themselves, but donors can deduct the value of their donations from their tax returns, which is why so many organizations seek 501c3 exemption. Many funders may only give to 501c3s. However, 501c3 organizations must comply with strict restrictions such as limits on political activity. Please see our quick tip on red flags for 501c3 organizations for more information on requirements and restrictions. Most groups that we work with are interested in applying for tax exemption as a public charity, but do note that private foundations are also covered under 501c3. Applying for 501c3 exemption requires the filing of either Form 1023, which is the long form, or 1023-EZ with the IRS. The 1023-EZ is a short version reserved for organizations who meet qualifications such as bringing in $50,000 or less each year. Generally, organizations should file for recognition within 27 months from the date that they were formed in order to have their exemption cover back to their formation date. We will mention some exceptions for organizations that don't actually need to apply for recognition. Next, 501c4 social welfare organizations operate to promote social welfare and benefit their communities. To gain 501c4 exemption, your organization must operate primarily to bring about common good in your community, such as civic betterment and social improvements. Unlike organizations with 501c3 status, 501c4 does not have the benefit of having their donors' contributions be tax deductible. So grants may not be as widely available for 501c4s. However, the benefit for 501c4s is that they do enjoy fewer restrictions on their activities, such as political activities, because those are allowed in areas that are related to their purpose. In some cases, though, political expenditures may still be subject to tax for 501c4s. Your organization must notify the IRS of your intent to operate as a 501c4 by filing Form 8976 online within 60 days after establishing the organization. For recognition of 501c4 exemption, organizations would need to file Form 1024A along with the accompanying user fee Form 8718. Besides 501c3s and 501c4s, you can see that there are some very specific tax-exempt organization types, as you see listed here, such as social clubs and others. Organizations wanting recognition of exemption under these sections would need to file Form 1024 along with the accompanying user fee Form 8718. In general, when applying for tax-exempt status, You first would need a federal employer ID number or EIN. You would apply for this using Form SS4 found on the IRS website. You would also want to make sure that your organizing documents, which would be articles of incorporation if you're incorporated, contain the required language on 501c3 purposes and dissolution requirements if you are applying for 501c3 exemption. Especially if you are filing the long form, there is a lot of financial and other information that you must provide. And so you would want to make sure you have all your information gathered and that it is accurate and complete. You must also pay a user fee to submit the application form. Currently for the 1023, the long form fee is $600 and the 1023 easy is $275, but these often change. There are a couple situations where an organization may never need to apply for recognition of tax exemption. First is that houses of worship, including associations of churches, this would include mosques and synagogues, they would not need to obtain recognition of exemption. Second, you may have heard of very small organizations that never filed for 501c3 recognition. If you are not pursuing grants for which 501c3 recognition is required, and your gross receipts always remain very small each year, you may not need to apply. Organizations with 501c3 purposes that we mentioned above that have gross receipts of $5,000 or less are treated as exempt under 501c3, even though you don't obtain recognition. But you do need to file your 990N regularly. Note that if you begin to receive over $5,000 a year, you do need to apply for recognition of tax exemption at that point. Almost every tax-exempt organization except houses of worship and some religious organizations must file a 990 series form with the IRS every year. For most small organizations, this is a very simple online form called the 990N e-postcard. It doesn't include any financial information, but you do just have to confirm that you received $50,000 or less that tax year. If you don't meet the criteria for 990Ns, you may need to file the 990EZ, which requires information about categories of revenue and expenses. But the most complicated or most detailed of the three is the full 990 form, and that is for organizations that make over $200,000 each year. Please note that the IRS will automatically revoke tax exemption for nonprofits who fail to file a 990 series form for 3 consecutive years. Now let's look briefly at some hypothetical tax-exempt organizations. First, we have a group operating on a short-term project to revamp a community park. We have ABC, who did not incorporate, but did form an association. They wrote, signed, and dated articles of association, and they don't have an IRS determination letter because they never sought federal recognition of exemption. And this all works for them because their mission was completed in a very short and definite time frame. They never really had liability concerns, and they never received any substantial amount of money. Next, we have CC Neighborhood Association, which is a group that decided to incorporate. They plan to be around for a while. Let's say that a few years ago, they never used to receive more than about $2,000 each year, and their income is mostly membership dues. They operated as one of those very small 501c3s that didn't have recognition from the IRS, but they did make sure to file their 990N every year. In the bottom scenario, let's say that this same association a few years later, or maybe another organization in a similar situation, decides that they do want to apply for 501c3 recognition. Maybe they started receiving over $5,000 and they basically are forced to, or maybe they just wanted to start applying for a grant that does require an IRS determination letter. Lastly, we have one more neighborhood association. Let's say that XYZ knew that their main income would be membership dues. Their mission would revolve around community improvement. And so they incorporated and decided to operate as a 501c4 organization. So they filed Form 8976 to give the IRS the notice of their intent to operate as a 501c4 as required, and they make sure to file their 990N every year. This works for them because they aren't interested in applying for grants or making sure that donations are tax deductible for their donors, and they want to have as much freedom as possible with their political activity. I hope these example situations were helpful illustrations to show different ways that nonprofits might operate under tax exemption. Just very briefly, there is the IRS website listed here, and also the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxation website. This is where you would find information on organizing documents. You can file them. You would have a link also to Maryland's Business Express page, which has business registration and document filing options. We are happy to answer any questions you have. Please visit our website, communitylaw.org, to see our workshops, more quick tips, and some helpful publications for nonprofits. You can also sign up to speak with an attorney for free if you need brief advice, or you can download our application for services to become one of our clients. Thank you. Take care.